Hey, if you're a business owner, if you're in sales and you're consistently asking your prospects, does that make sense? Does that sound good? Are you still with me? You're probably leaving tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue on the table because you are asking generic check-in questions. Hi, I'm Derek Stupsky, and what I do is I help sales teams and sales reps develop a more streamlined sales process. And I want to give you some insights on my top 4 keys to developing a really strategic presentation process that will allow you to be more efficient, get more yeses, and in the long run, make more money. All right, so the first thing that we're going to be focusing on is getting rid of the monologue. Salespeople love to talk, but it comes at a price. And far too often, I'm jumping on these calls with sales teams and sales reps, and they are going forever on their sales presentation, especially without any kind of pauses or engagement type check ins to make sure the prospect is actually following along. And when I say forever, I'm talking 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 15 minutes of the salesperson talking, just straight on bulldozing their prospect. And then all of a sudden they finish their 15-minute monologue and they go, does that make sense? And the prospect at this point has a glazed over look on their face and some drool coming out the corner of their chin. And they're like, oh, yeah, makes sense. Doesn't mean they heard everything that you said. Doesn't mean they like what you said. It makes sense. Doesn't mean I like it. Or that they're actually going to follow through and do what you were just talking about. So that's number one, is eliminating the monologue and getting your presentation down where you're only working in 2 to 3 sentence stretches at one time to make sure that you can keep engagement and collaboration through the sales process. Okay, the second biggest thing that I see all the time, and this goes right along with having those long monologues, is that the salesperson gives away way too much information, which probably causes those long monologues. But the problem is that they think information will help them make a decision. Obviously true, information will help make a decision, but the problem is they divulge way too much information. They're giving away everything and all the nuances that actually don't have anything to do with the outcome of the call. So they share everything that the product or service has to offer, but it doesn't feel tailored to the prospect's problems or what they're looking to solve. So therefore, the prospect feels overwhelmed. Your job as a salesperson is to make them believe and see that achieving their desired outcome is a simple path. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's probably going to require some work, but it's a path that is clearly laid out and is customized to them specifically. If you can have a customized presentation and keep it short and to the point and working in those 2 to 3 sentence stretches at a time with engaging check-ins, you're going to put yourself in a much better situation to close more deals. So I empower you. I'm asking you, if you are in sales, please look at what it is that you are saying, how long you're speaking for, and how can you trim the fat and create a very detailed but straight to the point presentation that lasts a couple sentences each way so that the prospect can actually consume what you're saying and think about applying it to help solve their problem. Okay, the third thing that I see is that sales presentation times are way too long. Now, this probably has something to do with monologues and too much information, but a lot of you are out there 30-minute call slots and you're spending 15 minutes in presentation. More than half the time you're pitching to the prospect. What this does is it takes the emphasis off of the prospect and makes it all about you. They don't need 15 minutes to hear about what you do. The rule of thumb that I like to live by when crafting sales presentations is that my presentation should be no more than 10 to 15% of the actual allotted time for the call. So if I have a 30-minute sales call, I am probably focused on presenting for 3 to 5 minutes at the absolute most. If I have a 60-minute sales call, I'm in presentation mode maybe 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how complex the product is and how much engagement I'm going to need to actually get it done. But that's about it. That's really as far as the presentation mode should go. So the way that you're going to do this is really, really simple. I want you to look at the top 3 reasons why people buy. What are the top 3 most valuable things that you do inside of your company, your product or your service? And I want you to categorize those from, if you have your top 3, take your third most important one and move it to number 1, move it to slot A. If you have your whatever's in the middle is going to be slot B, and then your most important thing, whether it be your guarantee or your big cherry on top, that will be in slot C. Now you have what we like to look at as our 3 pillars of the presentation. From there, all you're going to do is craft a 2 to 4 sentence explanation about what each one does and why it's so effective. Now, if you can do that, we're well off to the races here, because if you look at it, if you have 2 to 4 sentences per, and you only have 3 things that you're going to talk about, well, now all of a sudden we're looking at what? 6, 8, 12 sentences at the absolute most. Don't you think your time would be cut down if you're only presenting in 10 to 12 sentences? I think so as well. And that ties into my 4th thing, which is getting compliance over comprehension. We talked about those check-ins in the beginning of the video. We hit on them just a couple minutes ago. But the problem is that we go on these monologues, we give away way too much information, and then we go, does that make sense? No, yeah, sure, makes sense. Doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Doesn't mean that I feel comfortable moving forward with you. Doesn't mean I visually see it happening. So if you can take what we talked about in terms of monologues, too much information, and then focusing on narrowing down your presentation to be 10 to 15% of the actual allotted sales time, and then you start throwing in compliance-based questions. This is the key to the entire thing, is compliance-based questions. So instead of saying, what we have is 3 coaching calls per week, sound good? And they go, yeah, sure, sounds good. Or you can flip it and say, hey, we have 3 coaching calls per week. They run from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They're Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. All that we ask is that you can show up to one of those per week to get your questions answered in real time. Which time would work best for you? Which day could you commit to? Could you see yourself doing that? And getting them to start taking ownership over the things that they're going to need to be successful. If you can do that, you're going to get more micro commitments. They're going to start visualizing what it's actually going to look like to work with you, as opposed to being told what that's going to look like. And then they also feel like they have a hand in collaborating on creating a solution that is customized to them. So that is what I'm going to highly request of you, is that if you're in sales, start getting rid of the long sales presentations and these comprehension-based questions. Does that make sense? Does that sound good? And start flipping into more micro commitments and more compliance-based expectations for your clients or for your prospects who are soon to be clients, so that they actually have more buy-in and have clear-cut expectations of how to be successful inside of your program. If you can do those 4 key things, you're going to see a heck of a lot more success in your sales.